How we doing, everybody? And good morning. Welcome to another subscriber-exclusive video feed of the XSite Update podcast. My name is Mr. Excitement Ryan Kidd, and of course, you are an all-access member at the official Ryan Kidd Pro Patreon page, patreon.com/Ryan Kidd Pro. We've got a lot in store for you this week on the podcast, but before we get started, I want to reach out to all of my all-access subscribers and give you a little bit of an update here before we go live. We've got a lot to cover here on this week's episode. We'll be talking about the underground. So for those of you that don't know anything about the underground, you are in for a treat. And for those of you that do know something about the underground, you are also in for a little bit of surprises, some behind the scenes information, and a whole lot more as we cover that. We're also going to talk about this past weekend in San Diego and Tijuana, Mexico for the start of the Interstellar Tour, and so much more. So without any further ado, we are going to start the podcast officially for the listening public. Again, stay tuned if you are an all-access subscriber watching this on the subscriber-exclusive video feed, as we will have post-podcast comments and some other notes and tidbits that are not available to the rest of the listening public. With that being said, we will get started here in just a few seconds. XSite Update Episode 11 begins in 3, 2, 1. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the official 11th episode of the XSite Update podcast. My name is Mr. Excitement Ryan Kidd, and I want to thank you all for tuning in to the official Ryan Kidd Pro Patreon page at patreon.com/Ryan Kidd Pro to tune in this week for what should be an all-exclusive and exciting episode as we cover the Underground, the 2011 project that never was, but what had a huge ripple effect on the professional wrestling industry and those around it. Before we get started, I want to give a huge shout out to all of you that listen, subscribe, tune in, and sponsor the Ryan Kidd Pro brand. Again, we have all of our information regarding Ryan Kidd Pro, upcoming events, the weekly newsletter, free matches, and so much more at the official online home for Ryan Kidd, ryankidpro.com. Again, that's ryankidpro.com. With the plugs out of the way, we're going to dive right in here this week, as we have a lot to cover before we get started on today's topic. I want to welcome you all once again as we have officially met our mark and done a podcast for every scheduled release date in the month of January. I am excited about that. Unfortunately, as we see, we could not get Dickie Mayer in the studio, and I'm tired of making promises that aren't going to happen. Our schedules are just a little bit different right now. I can promise you this, that episode is coming. Me and Dickie have been working it out. It's been my fault sometimes. It's been his fault. It's been the weather's fault. It's been personal problem. It's been a bunch of stuff. So getting Dickie in the studio is something that him and I both want to happen. It's just a matter of time and circumstance and all that kind of good stuff. So again, Dickie's not here today. That's why we are moving on with a completely different topic, but the Iron Will Challenge and the all-in-depth review and recap and the whole 9 yards is coming your way sooner than you think. But again, just sit tight because we got two different schedules to work out. And again, we want to have him here in studio rather than a video call. I feel like that's going to get kind of the best atmosphere when him and I talk and sit down and go over one of the most important moments in his and I's career. And I think it'll be a good moment. But until that point, we have a little bit else to cover. Speaking of things to cover, let's talk about this past weekend. SoCal Pro Wrestling returned Destination Vista. There were some here and there kind of mix-ups with the venues. The event got rescheduled, not postponed, almost postponed. But the event got, the venue was changed, and we moved back to our original location, our home in Vista. And my, what an event it was, standing room only, like always. And the Vista crowd was hot, heavy, and ready. I'm mixing words now, but they were just as excited as I am about the whole thing. Unfortunately, I didn't pick up the win against the Inferno Dragon, but if you're curious about how that match, happened and how everything turned out and why I didn't walk away with the victory, you can find out this Thursday as a part of the premium weekly newsletter. That's right, we've got the full free match for you subscribers when you tune in to the weekly newsletter this Thursday. That's Ryan Kidd versus the Inferno Dragon 2, and it's coming your way on premium newsletter 154 this Thursday. I can't believe it's been that long, but it'll be tomorrow by the time you hear this. So the newsletter is coming, and the full free match for those of you that are not local to California will be available for you to watch in its entirety, and you'll be able to see that. It was a good event otherwise. Great weekend. The start of the Interstellar Tour couldn't have gone off without a more explosive start. And I'm not sure if you guys have been tuning into the Patreon page, but there's some new gear for the Interstellar Tour. Soon we'll be debuting new merchandise for the Interstellar Tour and a whole lot more. So the start of the year is off to a bang. Got a nice haircut if you're watching this on the All Access video feed. So I am feeling good. I am feeling ready for what's to come. And what's to come is Azteca Wrestling next week. That'll be the 27th and 28th down in Baja, California. I'm taking a vacation down to Los Cabos. But while I'm down there, it's not all fun and games because I'm going to be kicking ass and taking names. And it's not a vacation, not at all. I'm going down there for 2 days for two events, one in La Paz, Baja California, and the other in Los Cabos. So although it is a vacation land and I'll be tempted to hit the beach, I'll have to hit the ring first. So we'll see what the weekend entails with Azteca Wrestling, but I've got two high-profile semi-main event tag team matches scheduled for the weekend, one teaming with Anton Carrillo, an old foe, and another teaming against Anton Carrillo. So it will certainly be an interesting dynamic for the weekend. And again, the Interstellar Tour going off full time now here in 2023. And if January is indicative of what's to come in the first quarter, then we have a lot of exciting stuff heading into April WrestleMania here in Los Angeles. That's a whole nother topic for a whole nother day. But that is big news in the mainstream wrestling world coming your way, coming to California, coming my way sooner than I think. But on the topic of mainstream wrestling news, I would be remiss not to mention and to shed a light and take a moment to recognize and, kind of unfortunately here break the news to the listeners that aren't aware or that are just fans of Ryan Kidd or that don't follow the mainstream wrestling landscape super closely. We've lost a brother, unfortunately. Ring of Honor superstar and wrestling standout. I'm at a loss for words just trying to comprehend. Jay Briscoe has unfortunately passed away at 38 years old, and from what I understand, the situation is really severe for the rest of his family. And I don't want to go into details that I don't know anything about because that's not the point. But the point is that people were hurt and lives were changed forever. Just hours ago now. Here I'm recording this in the morning on Wednesday the 18th, and this news broke yesterday on the 17th, and I can only imagine what his friends and family and oh man, it's been a tough time for the wrestling space. It seems lately, at least from my perspective, and we just it's hard to deal with when you are on the road full time and you establish these relationships with people that become like family and like brothers, and it's really hard to and it's so young, and there's just such a tragedy in all any way you look at it, it's just no good. um, so take time today to think about not only the Briscoe family and all that, but take time to put into perspective your own situations and your own life. And life is just so it's so fragile, and it can end in an instant, and it's so precious. So keep that in mind throughout your week. It's something that's been lingering in my mind since the start of the year, obviously, since the loss of Jason Strife, and they celebrated his memorial and they celebrated his life, and his funeral took place over the last week. So it's been a difficult period for the wrestling landscape and for myself, and but it's things that we have to talk about. So life's not entirely easy, but we want to remember these people and the impression that they made on us and on our lives, and I think that's important. So, man, rest in peace to Jay Briscoe. What a tragedy. I can without making it about me, and this is, I mean, again, that's we'll leave it at that. But the influence that Jay Briscoe had on me, I never met him personally, and seeing the outpouring of support and love and all the personal stories from him about him, and it was really heartwarming, and it speaks to the brotherhood and the kinship and the fellowship between pro wrestlers and between the locker room. And I thought that that was really special. And without ever having met him, or to my knowledge, ever having shared a locker room with him, just being on other sides of the world, and he's such a star. And um, but man, what an impact he had on me in my career. I can remember being, sheesh, probably 10 years old and picking up a Ring of Honor DVD from the mall, and it was their best of kind of series of matches. They had four different discs that had made it into stores, and I can recall picking up two or three of them at the time, and I was stunned to have seen Ring of Honor in the store, so I had to have it. And so I went home, and again, it was different matches from different shows from all over the world. I think this one was called Best in the World, perhaps, and it was um, or greatest matches. It was something about just all star standout matches, and naturally the Briscoes were in a handful of these matches. But the one that stands out is a match that took place in the UK during a Ring of Honor UK tour, and this had to have been early 2004, 5, or 6, and the Briscoes took on Austin Aries and Roderick Strong, and me and my buddy were just like jaw dropped. We had never seen wrestling like this in our life, and it really, really like opened my eyes to what eventually ended up becoming my passion and my career. And you know and that match sticks with me to this day. I mean, it was um, you know so monumental, and those guys were at the forefront of such a culture movement in pro wrestling and a style movement, and starting out so young. And those guys, Jay and Mark, the Briscoe brothers, their story being um, one that I can relate to so closely, that in that they had started so young and they had to deal with a lot of speed bumps in the road, becoming pros and becoming, earning that respect. And I'm sorry if I'm not as articulate as I normally am. It's just, it's hard to find the words to, comprehend such a young man with so much potential and so much currently going. And it really is just, it's just so shocking, and it's so sad. So again, I could go on about that for the rest of the episode, but that's not what the episode is about. It's not what it should be about. But I do, and I did want to make time to remember not only Jay Briscoe, but most importantly today, Jay Briscoe, but just the people in our lives that that make a difference and that make an impact. And I think it's important that we recognize those people. So R.I.P. Jay Briscoe, for sure. It's incredibly sad. So you know, we will keep that in mind throughout the week, and we'll keep the family and the friends and everybody that's affected by this, in I hate to say thoughts and prayers, but in our thoughts and prayers, because that's all we can do at this time. So, on a lighter note, we will move on as we chug towards. We're getting there. We're chipping away. We've just got a couple more things to cover before we talk about the underground, which I'm so excited to talk about here today. The research for this, on my part, just going back and looking at the archive and remembering some of these matches and all that, it was huge. But before we get there, real quick, what's Ryan reading? We are coming to the close on the National Wrestling Alliance book by Tim Hornbaker. I talked about it a couple weeks ago on the official first ever What's Ryan Reading. For those of you that don't know, I really, really like to read. I've just picked up like a handful of books. I've got a list here in front of me of things that don't fit on my shelf that are in the queue. So I've got a queue on the shelf, and then beyond that, I've got an index card with the queue of books to read after that. So we've got a lot of things to read, but currently I'm coming to the end of the National Wrestling Alliance book by Tim Hornbaker. I talked about it a couple of weeks ago about kind of what the book was about and how it dives into the creation and subsequent, I don't know if you'd say destruction, but the story of the National Wrestling Alliance and those that affected it, and those that wrestled as a part of it, and really one of the longest lasting wrestling enterprises and corporations, monopolies, intellectual property, whatever you want to call it, and still to this day, uh, presented in 2023. It's incredible. So it's a really good read, and I'm coming to the end of it. Just now getting to the acknowledgments and getting through to kind of the index of the book here as I kind of match up some of the footnotes and the thumbnails and go back and look at the photos. But as I finish it up, I thought it was a great book. I thought it was entirely all encompassing, so to speak. And it talked a lot about, pro wrestling. And I love reading about the early stages of pro wrestling in the early 40s and in the 1920s and in the 1930s, for professional standards here in the United States, and from that regard. So getting information about that was really good. And as I chug forward, my next book to read on the queue is subsequently called The Death of the Territories. And so this is kind of the uphill slope is what we just read about the National Wrestling Alliance, and then subsequently the death of the territory that they built around the United States. So the territories that they built around the United States. So again, that's what's Ryan reading. I'm really excited to get through those, and as soon as I'm done with that, I've got Mick Foley's book that I just picked up, and I'm looking forward to reading that. And then I've got some comics I got to catch up on. So there's some Batman and some other stuff, and we'll talk all about comics when the time comes. But it might be a few weeks, maybe even a few months before we get through the What's Ryan Reading queue to get down to the comics. So that is what's going on in my personal life, and I kind of like to touch on that. And before we start our topic here today, a quick update for all of you that are subscribers at patreon.com. Your Patreon privilege, never before printed 8x10 autograph photo, is in the mail. It's shipped. I know because I shipped it myself. You've been reached out to with your tracking number and all that. So I got to look at these photos, obviously, because I had to sign them. And man, I knew obviously the print because I chose it, but it came out great. And it's really like close up and it looks good. And I autographed it in some shiny gold ink and I dated it with 2023. So that is exclusive and that is for you if you are a Patreon subscriber at patreon.com/RyanKidPro. And every month we have the Patreon privilege coming to subscribers. So again, if you sign up, make sure you opt in to receive mail-in benefits and enter in your shipping address because that way I can get your information and get your item to you every single month. Next month, in the month of February, if you subscribe on Patreon, you already know, but we are bringing to you a free Ryan Kid Pro t-shirt. So this is free. You don't have to pay for any shipping. You don't have to pay. I mean, obviously you have to be a subscriber, but you don't have to do anything from that. So for you could subscribe for little and get a free t-shirt along with all the content, along with all of the past content, the entire archive. At this point, there's got to be over 500 posts of free matches, never before seen photo, personal photo, interviews, Q&As, polls, the whole nine. So that is going on in the business world. And now with that being said, let's get to the topic. We covered a little bit of life. We covered a little bit of business. We covered a little bit of wrestling. We covered a little bit of reading. And now we are going to get here this week to the underground. So again, if you know nothing about this, you are in for a treat. And if you know something about this, you are in for even more of a treat because there is some stuff that is you might not have ever known about it. So I'm going to take you back in the time machine all the way back to 2011. We're talking about a very young Ryan Kidd. I must have been a sophomore or a junior in high school here at this point, and I had just kind of begun my training and just started working on. I wouldn't say a full time schedule, but I'm working consistently on wrestling events, and I'm starting to get experience, and I'm starting to get reps in. So it wasn't an odd thing for me to be told about a project that was going on in Los Angeles by the promoter of SoCal Pro. So I wasn't entirely training at SoCal Pro at this time full time, but I began to dip my feet into the other training schools in San Diego, and I wanted to expand my experience. And at the time, New Wave, where I was training full time, was almost a seasonal training experience because we were outdoors. And during the start of the year, it was always really difficult to get going on a consistent basis because we would always get rained out. So there was many a times, and we'll talk about in a future episode when we talk about year one of my career. Mopping up the ring with our t-shirts and with our backs and getting there hours early just so we could have a full experience of training. And there was a lot of trials and tribulations getting through that. So no harm, no foul. It was all part of my story. But there came a point where getting more involved with SoCal Pro was reasonably the next step up in my career. So getting involved more with SoCal Pro and that crew and getting involved with the training, part of it and part of just pro wrestling is the dues paying process and getting there early and setting up the ring and setting up chairs and being reliable and being a runner and someone that can just be accountable and someone that can be counted on. So when I became one of those guys to the promoter of SoCal Pro because I was so eager to not only help out and to be involved and to be a part of the show, but 9 times out of 10 for some of these small shows, rule number one is bring your gear, because when I go and I help and I set up and I'm a runner and I'm reliable, naturally the promoter says, okay, I can trust you with little. Let me trust you with more. And that's always been like a fundamental understanding of life and business for me, is you have to be accountable for what's little, and you have to be responsible for what's little before you're trusted with something greater, before you're trusted with something that is bigger than that responsibility. So either way, I had paid those dues, so to speak, in the mind of the promoter, to where I had become what I call a speed dial contact. To where I tell young wrestlers all the time, be there and be, again, responsible and accountable. Be someone that we can rely on. That way, whenever the promoter needs something, whenever the boss needs something, whenever someone important needs something, they're going to reach out to someone they rely on, a speed dial contact, someone that's one of the first guys that they call when they need something done, because they know that this person is going to give it their all to get it done. So I had essentially, in my mind, become a speed dial contact. So when this project in 2011 comes up and SoCal Pro is providing the ring, um, I kind of start sending out feelers like, hey, what's up with this? I heard that another buddy, Nick Lovin, I heard that he got booked for this. And by this point, there's the SoCal Pro House. So for people that have followed for a long time, and there's a lot of insider stuff here, but this was a period, again, SoCal Pro training and getting involved with all these guys and getting involved with the training scene. There was a house owned by a wrestler named Nick Lovin, and he literally looks like Mick Lovin from Superbad if you haven't seen him before. But Nick Lovin owned a house that his grandpa allowed him to live in, and he would be like essentially the manager of the property and rent out the rooms. And this was a beautiful overlooking the beach, and here in La Jolla, and or I'm sorry, in Del Mar in California, which is an even nicer area. And this was a multi-million-dollar property, seriously. And it essentially became the wrestling frat house when he rented out all these rooms in due time to varying wrestlers that trained at SoCal Pro, because they need somewhere to crash. He had cheap rent for whatever, you know what I mean? And it just worked out to where next thing you know, there's 6 or 7 wrestlers living there, with me going over there every day to grill and hang out and work on, all of our projects at the time. So there was a lot going on at that house, and there was a lot of I don't want to say gossip, but not we're bragging. There's a lot of dick measuring. There's a lot of oh well, guess what I got. So naturally, when Nick starts puffing his chest out and peacocking about how he got booked for this TV deal and how he's gonna be he's in a feature role, and it's like, oh, what the hell? Come on, how is Nick getting booked? He's not even the best wrestler in the house. So we all reach out to Jeff, and we're all trying to get booked, and we find out sooner rather than later. The entire house finds out that this is more of a TV production than we think, because it's like, no, 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 no. They're casting, and there's roles, and you got to send in like they're not like a headshot, they're not official like that, but it was more official than the average wrestling booking. Let me show up and set up and bring my gear and see if I no they were doing official casting for this. So when I reach out and send in my portfolio, my resume, and it was very it must have been slim at the time, much like myself in the promo shot that I sang. Could not have been 150 pounds soaking wet. There's no way. So little did I know that this fit the role perfectly for the scrawny, undersized, underdog character that they were looking to cast on the show. So it didn't take long before the promoter SoCal Pro reaches out to me and says, "Hey, the guy's interested. He wants to reach out to you. Can I give him your information?" So naturally, I'm like, "Whoa, this is huge! Like I'm gonna have to take off school for this." And it's not long before I get in contact with the promoter, the figurehead of the project, and he was someone that had worked on a similar project on a larger scale with bigger wrestling superstars. That now, if I were to read you the Rogues Gallery, the list of names that was a part of that project, it would astonish you. They're all a part of WWE, or they're all a part of major corporations to this day. So, looking and understanding that, and knowing that he's putting on step two, the next step of this project, it's like, whoa, this is essentially the biggest booking I've ever gotten. This is the biggest opportunity I've ever had. And it's a couple days in LA, and he kind of breaks down the character to me. The idea of 1600, which at a certain point in time was the perfect score on the SAT, perfect grading score on the SAT. To this day, it's not, but for the longest time, it was. So the name of the character is 1600, the smart, nerdy, quirky, young student athlete. And naturally, that's an underdog character. And as we'll break down the matches and the story of 1600 as we go through the episode, it'll start to kind of make sense, and the vision was really there. But at the time, I understood nothing. I understood absolutely nothing. All I could hear, he could have said blah, 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 blah. But to me, cool. Like the brand, I was so excited about it, and I was so naive to pro wrestling that it was such an easy yes for me. Like, okay, cool, like I'll be there. It's in LA, it's in Hollywood. This is a, I fanboyed out. I marked out, and it was not long before emails were exchanged and info was exchanged, and we had all the details, and um, there was a crew of us going up. And so this took place in, man, I was trying to do the research on it, and it had to have been the early part of the year in 2011. I want to say April or May. So not only did Nick get booked for the show, not only did myself get booked for the show, but a third man from the house, Renee, we call him Rennie, he was booked for the show as well. And so when the three of us got in the car, it was like, okay, boys' weekend all day, let's go, let's go. Wrong. Nick goes up a day or two early. He's staying in a hotel. He thinks that because he got casted as the mob boss, the Don in the show, that he's that he's a head honcho in real life, even though we're all getting paid the same. So when he goes up there days early, it kind of leaves us, myself and Renee, out in the rain, and me and him and the rest of the guys in the house, we kind of consolidate and we make it work, and we hop up in the car. The problem is we go up there for a day and come back where we need to be up there for 2 days. So that's why Nick got the hotel, and that's why he does all this. And because of that, my travel journey on day two was nightmarish. And we'll talk all about that again as we move forward. But I want to just put a footnote in that because of Nick's whole little superstar ordeal, he made the trip miserable for every single one of us. So that's a big F you to Nick Lovin, and we still give him crap for it to this day because he was really on his high horse that week. I'm talking really on his high horse. And he spent a boatload of money trying to look like a Hollywood superstar, and nothing came of it. And when the videos came out and when everything was published, he was probably the most legitimately unlikable character. Not in like the good way, not in like an evil movie. It was like people really, really didn't like him. So it all came full circle for Nick Lovin. But that's just a funny sidebar and a funny side note, and it was all in good fun. But what a weekend of travel it ended up being. So the first day we go up and we get up there, and this is an early day. We're talking like 7 a.m. We've got to be there, or 9 a.m. or 8 a.m. We've got to be there. And 2 hours away, we're in San Diego, going up to LA with LA traffic in the morning for everyone getting to work like we are. It was, we had to be up and on the road by 6:30 or 7 in the morning, or even earlier if we had to be there at 8 or 7. It's either way, subtract 2 or 3 hours to get back from there. So it was an early morning for all of us getting out and getting to this weird kind of dungy, dirty warehouse space in LA. And the whole block is kind of lined with these warehouse spaces that you would use for movie sets, and that you would use for a car chase scene, or that you would use for a hostage situation, or that you would use for whatever you can think of. But this is how kind of LA is set up, and this part of Hollywood is set up for movie scenes, and it's set up to fit a certain type of vibe. And it definitely captured the vibe here with this warehouse, and there wasn't much in it. And then this, kind of sectored off corner of this massive space is the SoCal Pro Wrestling Ring, and it's kind of dolled up in a different way, and it's blacked out, and it looks dirty and dungy, and it fits the idea of what was presented to me as the underground. And slowly but surely, the cast of characters starts to show up, and there was rumblings of who else was on the show, but this wasn't an official promoted wrestling live event. So there's no flyer, there's no promoted card, there's no concept or idea to the public of who's a part of this project. So I was really going in there blind. So when guys like MVP from WWE start showing up, and the Young Bucks now in AEW start showing, and kind of a who's who at the time of wrestling talent in LA and internationally, it was eye opening. And me being a part of this project, it was like, wow, this is really starting to sink in that I'm in deep water here. And we get kind of set up as far as makeup, and they give us scripts and they make us fill out tax forms, which at the time I was 15, 16, 17. So I can remember flubbing. I'm not sure if there's a statute on the, but I can remember, like, I guess I'll just say that I'm 18 because I don't really know if they know that I'm a teenager. Like, I literally took off school to go up and do this project. So that was just kind of a funny side note. Nothing ever came of it. I got my check in the mail and there was really no problem. Of course, they taxed me, so I'm sure they had no problem doing it. But it was an interesting start, and I brought a handful of different gear options, and they had suggested I bring some stuff that might fit the character. And what was decided on, oddly enough, was the shoes that I was wearing there, like my street shoes, my Vans, lace up shoes with my long ankle high socks, and my brother's PE gym shorts. So I had a pair of gym shorts for my own high school uniform, but my brother's gym shorts were just a little bit, they were a lot bit smaller. He's 5 years younger than me. So they were kind of that over the knee, athletic, old school PE look with just a white t shirt. And it really wasn't far off from what I wear day to day in regular life. But it was kind of maximized again in that the shorts were a bit smaller and then it looked more like a PE uniform, which is not exactly what I wear day to day, but close. And it was kind of perfect. They loved it, and it was the ideal student. It would just, I looked like a kid because I was. And so they start breaking down the matches, and I find out that the first match I'm going to do, and keep in mind, this is all taped over the course of 2 days. So when it's released in a week to week segment, episodic television show on YouTube, and it still exists to this day. So I want to recommend that people go back and check out the Underground. Maybe in a bonus episode, we can watch some of these episodes and do an official watch along for some of these. But today we're just going to kind of talk about it, and you're free to look at the Underground content. And it was produced by Awesomeness TV, which is a big deal. They produce a lot of YouTube and viral mainstream media content now to this day, and they're involved in large productions. So at the time, I knew nothing about nothing. But looking back on it, wow, what an incredibly large project it was. And to be involved in that at such a young age without probably anybody knowing that I was actually as young as I looked was incredible in hindsight, is incredible in hindsight. So when they start setting up my first match, I take on who at the time was wrestling in Southern California as Brandon Parker. And he was an intense, well formed physically, albeit undersized a bit, um, strong style wrestler, and he really was intense, and he brought the ferocity. And I can remember being super ecstatic about wrestling Brandon because, again, he was someone in the wrestling scene that was a generation or two above mine. So naturally, he was just literally a step or two above me, and he was someone that I wanted to test myself against. And he was always on shows that I was, um, setting up the ring for, or lucky enough to be on the undercard for. So it was, again, kind of just like talking about those tangible goals, like we talked about with Jason Strife. He was exactly like that. He was someone that it was like, if I can just have that match with him, then it'll prove to the people that I can hang with him. If I can hang with him, then who's to say I can't take a step up and hang with the other guys that he's hanging with? You know what I mean? Like, it was that type of idea. So getting to wrestle him, I'm thinking, okay, this is my opportunity. We're gonna go balls out. We're gonna, like, let's do it. And then they start like breaking down what they want from the match, and shortly find out that, like, okay, we're not doing anything that I had in mind. Like, this isn't gonna be the back and forth that it was nothing like I expected. And because of it being produced, it turned out to be such a more emotionally captivating product. And that goes to show how little I knew about actual pro wrestling, because it wasn't and isn't necessarily about the moves, but more so the story that you can tell and the emotions that you can withdraw using those moves and using those actions. So again, I knew nothing about that. So at the time, teenager that just wants to have this match, it was disappointing because I got to go, 5 or 6 minutes with Brandon, who's wrestling at the time in the underground as Dread, this evil leather clad character, which is hilarious in hindsight. But at the time, he was presented as incredibly intense. And we have this short match, and he beats the crap out of me. I mean, it was a total squash. And comes out after the bell and beats me up, and that was not supposed to happen. We went under time for what they were looking to record. So as I was going out, he comes back out and beats me up and keeps it going. And that was a funny little note. And again, the first time I'd ever had to deal with that, is, on a mainstream basis. Dealing with television wrestling is so different from just having a match on the indies or just doing whatever you want to do, because you're subject to time and you're subject to commercial breaks, and you have to be informed, and you have to do that all under kind of the dark of night and under the guise of the magic of pro wrestling. So a completely different and new form of wrestling for me, and being produced by guys like MVP and guys like that, that I had never worked with before. It was incredible. And again, doing things that I had never done in wrestling. It was not only being produced by guys that I respected, being produced to do something that I had never ever done before. It was such a unique learning experience looking back. But at the time, it was like, man, I didn't get this match that I wanted, and da 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 da. And it doesn't take long. We have lunch because you have to do that because we're filing taxes. So we have to have lunch breaks. We have to have official breaks and da 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 da. There was all sorts of official business, and this is a Hollywood project. We were sitting down in makeup chairs. They're putting Vaseline all over my face so that we can spray it with the bottle to present sweat. And we're doing pre-tapes and post-match tapes and different settings and all that. And this was again completely new to me. I'm having to be a different character. I can recall at times cutting pre-tapes of me saying and da 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 da, and Ryan Kidd is gonna, and they go, okay, well that was a good promo, but can you do it this time saying 1600? And it was like, oh my gosh, like I brain fart, had no idea. So again, such a learning experience for me as a young wrestler, and I look back on it and it's so fondly because it was again something so new, and I got to interact with different talent and and have these matches, and more importantly these pre-tapes and these promos, and kind of getting into the skin of another character was super crucial for me. And getting in the skin of this character and getting involved in the promo work wouldn't be complete without, again, like an antithesis or something to do, or like again an objective for the character. So when 1600 gets destroyed by Dread, they start to present the idea that, like, man, I'm just like, oh, I'm frustrated by the loss. I want to win. All we want to do is win. I have got the perfect score, so to speak. I'm the intelligent wrestler as being presented. So it's like naturally the frustration comes in, and they introduce a mentor character who was a Northern California wrestler who wrestles as Mike Hayashi, if I'm not mistaken, and they brought him into the underground creatively as Hayashi. So Hayashi, the high flying Hayashi, he starts to reach out to 1600, and he starts to lend encouragement and starts to act sort of as a coach for the character. And we are met with the dreaded, not dread, we are met with the dreaded foe, Blades. So Blades, funny enough, looking back on all of it, and if you're watching this on the video, I've got a huge smile on my face, a huge grin, is played by Rennie, our friend from the house. And he is like the biggest teddy bear, the most like soft spoken, nice guy that you have ever met. Would not hurt a fly. Seriously, would not hurt a fly. The nicest guy ever. And I love Renee, and he's so great. And during this time, like it was a hoot. Like again, anyone in the house, whether that was Nick or Renee or Eddie Randall, who again, that's a whole nother episode. But if you know anything about me and my history, like all of these guys, it was just like such a laugh. And if you know any of our podcast history, like it was always just such a laugh. And so when they have Renee playing the leather jacket clad badass, like biker gang badass, it is so hilarious. But he ends up being our antagonist, the antagonist to myself and Hayashi. And during these pre-tapes, he's, kind of mocking me for being a loser and so on and so forth. And that all pays off and culminates in the third and final match of the series where 1600 gets his big win. But that doesn't come before a huge match, looking back now in my career, with Matt Jackson of the Young Bucks. So he was involved in his own main event. He was kind of one of the primary protagonists of the event. Him and his brother, obviously the Young Bucks. How could you have an event in LA and do television and have high flying underground pro wrestling without the Young Bucks, who at the time were doing something that was completely innovative and cutting edge and new on the scene? And having them involved was a no brainer. So when they're doing their own little story and just having them as a part of the project and being able to kind of share the set with them and being able to kind of josh around, and we'd interacted a couple times before, but being able to kind of again just share that space with them, it was like that was good enough. And come to find out, as we're starting to walk through the process of matches and in between tapes, and okay, well, get ready for your next match, because that's going to be, there's a whiteboard with all the times and matches, and I look at the whiteboard, and next thing you know, I'm wrestling Matt Jackson of the Young Bucks, and it's like, whoa, okay, um, this is big. So we go out there, and he wrestles at the time again as PW3, a completely different character, because the Underground had all of us wrestling as different characters to be, um, I don't know, in touch with whatever their project was trying to accomplish. And so we have this match, and it's a lot more competitive. And now you can start to see what's going on here. Where in the first match, 1600 gets completely obliterated. Now in the second match, he's starting to show a little bit more of that fire. He's got something in him. And Matt Jackson did a really, really great job of presenting that. And, again, he was he could have done it with a broomstick. So, but again, him walking me through that and having that match with me and doing what he did for me was huge. And he picks up the victory there, probably with a super kick, if I'm not mistaken. But man, what a moment for me! And it was like, wow, like not only did I get this small goal, not small goal, not to say that, but this tangible goal in Brandon Parker, because him and I were sharing events frequently, but now I'm sharing the ring and I'm hanging, so to speak, with the Young Bucks. Like those guys were on that level even at that time. And so it was huge, and like what a confidence booster, and what a day, and how incredible was this whole thing. And again, because I pick up the loss, that only adds fuel to the fire of Blades, kind of his antagonism. And as we go through the story, Hayashi loses a match, and after the match, I kind of try to console him, and he blows me off. He blows up, and he's aggressive, and he's angry. And so now there's a problem between myself and Hayashi. Now he thinks I'm trying to tell him what to do and how I'm nobody and so on and so forth. And now with Blades are, so there's this three-way issue, and it culminates with the three-way match, which again we talk about 1600 getting a big win. And three-way matches are notoriously tricky and notoriously difficult. This one went off kind of without a hitch, if I remember correctly. And again, going back and being able to see some of this stuff, um, you got to put it in a capsule, because it was a different time, and I'm a completely different wrestler now, and there's just completely different presentation. But going back and watching this, like, man, it was special. And now I completely understand, and I may not have entirely, but it started to grow as the story developed, that like, okay, wait, now I see what we're doing here. And that 1600 was someone that we assumed could have never gotten a win. He was presented as this young kid that never had a chance, and it just was never going to happen. And now here he is picking up a win against not only someone, but the two guys that were saying that he couldn't have gotten it done, or that so they paid it off perfectly. And it was, again, you can only do so much over the course of, let's just say, 13 episodes. So I didn't wrestle on every show, or I didn't have a promo or a pre-tape on every show, but they did a good job of kind of breaking things up and making you wait for it, and making it also, at the same time, flow together well without, whatever happened to that. So all the stories kind of came together full circle, and there was a lot of them, whether it was Famous B and Buggy Nova and their relationship story, or the Young Bucks and the relationship drama that they presented on the show, and that the 1600 story, the Dread story, and so much more. So it was really well written, from my perspective. Again, I'm no I'm no actor, I'm no writer or director, but in that they had just a handful of stories that you could sink your teeth into, a primary story overall, um, and it really kind of flowed together well. So that was kind of the 1600 perspective of it. Let me kind of break down for you real quick and summarize the concept of the underground. So the concept of the underground was an underground, high flying, hybrid pro wrestling, Los Angeles based with a live event crowd. So they did have like plants in the crowd and they had some fans, um, but like primarily there was like 100 or 200 super rowdy extras and plants around the ring that were like getting into the matches, and that they were making it on tape look like this was like the livest thing in the world. And it was presented really well. When they produced it and cut it on the cutting room floor, they added some sound effects that really, and from my perspective, took away from the wrestling aspect of it, and they made it too much of an action movie, and it got to be a bit cringy. And as the episodes went on, the fans became a little bit disengaged with the overall story. And again, may have some of that may have had to do with casting, having Nick Lovin in that role. And I only kid, but the story being that Nick Lovin had won the last season of the Underground, and I use air quotes with that because there was no last season of the Underground. So we join the story in progress where Nick Lovin is playing the character King, and he is the head of the Underground, and he sets up this Underground Fight Club and a tournament with a huge cash prize and control of the Underground on the line. So whoever wins this big tournament is going to be in King or Nick's position for the next season, so to speak. And so they set up a handful of matches, and it's a single elimination tournament. And as the single elimination tournament goes on, as the losers are eliminated from the tournament, they almost break off into their own storyline. So where I had lost to Dread, I move on into my own thing with the other guy, Blades, who had lost in his first round match to Famous B. You know what I mean? So the story, and as the tournament goes on, the people involved in the tournament start to become more involved with each other. The two brothers, Matt and Nick Jackson, haven't seen each other in a long time. Naturally, they meet each other in the finals. However, the finals are disrupted by King, who doesn't want to lose power of the Underground. And again, Dread, who had destroyed me in the beginning, so he's established as a high ranking evil character. He teams up with Nick, and they attempt to thwart the two brothers from gaining control of the Underground. They break up their match. That turns into a 2-on-2 for control of the Underground, which naturally the two brothers walk away with their hands held high, and the Underground is left in positivity control of the brothers and Liz, their gal that was written into the show. And she was a great gal. The entire cast, they were awesome. It was, again, such a fun time, and it was such a new experience for me. So again, I recommend going and checking that out. My summary doesn't do it justice at all. There's 13 episodes. I think they're about 10 to 15 minutes each. So if you really want to sit down and binge through it, you can check it out. It's The Underground. We'll post some of the videos in the comments of this podcast. That way you can check it out. But the aftermath of this, it's kind of a sad story. We finish taping, we close up shop on the set, and nothing happens. Nothing really happens for a long time. And after about a year or so, The Underground finally makes its debut. And it took time to produce and it took time to get out. But they drop it on YouTube. And again, to this day, it's still available. But it didn't quite catch the steam or the momentum that it should have. And we didn't hear anything. And the original project, the parent project to The Underground, which was the Wrestling Retribution Project, had an entire ordeal with the way that they did business about getting that show crowdfunded, and they didn't produce it and they didn't release it on time. And it was kind of left with a bad taste in the mouth of the fans of wrestling because, again, they had helped crowdfund this really large produced for television wrestling project and didn't hear anything about it. So naturally, they felt burned by the project. Getting The Underground being kind of a lesser than project for free on YouTube wasn't quite the consolation that anybody really wanted. And so naturally, it just fizzled out. Ultimately, during the pandemic, the Wrestling Retribution Project television episodes were released online, kind of in a sign of good faith from the guy who produced it and put it together, saying, "Hey, listen, I know I burned you guys, as far as I know," and he put it out, and now He's also doing the research for this project. I'm not entirely promoting it, but if you'd like to go check it out as you go back in the underground, he's added his own personal commentary years later and talking about the episodes and talking about the stories and giving an insider's perspective. So if you want to hear even more about the underground and the makings of and what happened and how it took place and why it took place, it would be in your best interest to go and check that out along with the episodes. They're in a playlist together, and I think it's a really fun project. And I think it was something that was really cool. What wasn't cool was getting home. So, day one, we finish on set, and I go home. As soon as I get home, I'm there just in time to go to a quinceanera. And this is like I'm in high school, so I go to a friend's quinceanera, and these are like Mexican birthday parties that go all freaking night. So when I'm out until like 1:32 in the morning dancing and messing with balloons and it's lights and it's all sorts of fun and all that, it's like, oh my gosh, like I got to go home because I need to be up to LA at whatever 7 in the morning. So I get home. I have like 2 or 3 hours of sleep in my mom's apartment on her couch. And I borrow my sister's car and drive up to LA and with like 3 hours of sleep. And it was like one of the most brutal rides I can ever recall having. Just being so young, I wasn't experienced in driving. And I can remember having to pull over at like a rest area and like take a nap in my back seat for 30 minutes. But then again, I'm thinking, well, I can't be late to this. This is huge. So I get up there for day two, and we had already done all the matches on day one. So this was just finishing up on promos, doing anything else that we needed to do. So I get up there and I do maybe one or two things, and they don't need me anymore, and that's it. So I could have easily shown up late. I could have easily, whatever. It was kind of one of those, well, eye roll moments. But again, I brought it on myself. What the heck am I doing staying out that late? But I can recall that being just a little bit of a tricky process, and I can remember shaking my fist and Nick Lovin because we all could have just gone up there and ridden in the same car the same 2 days. But because he threw a wrench in the whole process, trying to be a superstar and stay in his own hotel room, he threw a wrench in the entire process. And now I was stuck driving sleepy on the road. But again, just all in good fun. It was a really great and a fun project. And um, the 1600 character kind of still lives in infamy to this day. Nobody um, forgets about it. But if you know about 1600, then you don't forget about it. And I'm constantly reminded of some of the aliases that even I've forgotten about. So again, going back and doing this research for this show was really a good eye-opening moment to take a look back on my career in a period that was really critical in that growth for me, getting in the ring with guys that I had never shared the ring with before, and doing promos and being produced and being involved with some of the top stars in the wrestling business and the camaraderie along there's so many stories to this day that just stand out. The Nick Lovin stories and MVP kicking a hole in the wall was a crazy story telling. He was recalling a story from New Japan, and he getting so excited in his story he kicks a hole in the wall, and like I can recall looking around and we're like, dude, this guy's insane, this is so awesome. And from the really live crowd and being involved in matches where it's like, dang, I've never really had a crowd interact like this, to getting a check in the mail a few weeks later, my first ever wrestling check. It was just a really cool, eye-opening and unique experience. So um, that's really the story of the underground. And if you kind of thought that nothing came of it, you might be right. However, if I told you that the exact same venue that was used for the underground was the venue that they used for Lucha Underground, would you believe me? Would you believe me if I told you that half of the talent that they used on the underground was also used on Lucha Underground? Would you believe me if I told you that one of the producers for the underground is most likely one of the producers for Lucha Underground? I don't know if that last one's true, but I highly, highly believe that. Because if you look and compare the similarities and few differences between what became Lucha Underground and YouTube's The Underground, the similarities are astonishing. They're second to none. You literally cannot dispute that the ripple effect that was created by this underground grunge fight club hybrid pro wrestling project did not influence Lucha Underground. There's no way that you can tell me that. And the ripple effect that it has continues to this day as we see Lucha Underground like scenarios being played out on Impact on an almost weekly basis, being played out in WWE during the pandemic with their cinematic matches and some of those cinematic projects. It really, really started a chain of wrestling events that has continued to this day, and it's modified the wrestling landscape and modified the wrestling culture. And I think that's a testament to the vision of the project, although it didn't turn out to be the best, although it didn't turn heads in the way that it probably should have or could have. In the long run, you have to consider the starting of this type of wrestling production being the catalyst to more, and the foundation to present more, and the foundation of the idea of thought that we can cut something for pro wrestling that can be presented in the realm of a film script. And if you watch Impact Wrestling, they rely so heavily on that level of production of these real life problems. And again, in the world of wrestling that we live in now, where the lines of show business, entertainment, and sport are so blurred, I can't tell you if that's the right or wrong approach, but it's definitely a unique approach. And from my perspective, it was, if not started, it was certainly moved forward and pushed forward by projects like The Underground. And I'm confident in saying that. So the effect of The Underground is up to you to decide. However, I would not make a final decision without checking it out. So again, that's The Underground, produced by Awesomeness TV. And if you want, check out your boy 1600, because there are 3 really fun matches and a handful of really fun promos that I was involved in. Again, 2011, the start of my career, just a year in. And again, what an incredible time. So that was the story of the Underground. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions and a lot of fallout that we might be able to cover on another episode. But again, with just 3 matches and a 2-day taping schedule, there really wasn't much more to it than that. Again, the feedback speaks for itself. If you want to check out the YouTube comments, you can see as the episodes progress what characters caught on, what characters didn't, and now when you look back in hindsight, what characters made a connection with the mainstream wrestling audience and that you see to this day, and which ones you don't quite see so often. So I think that's important to note as we wrap up the episode here, episode 11, and it's been a unique one. We took different, emotional paths here. There was high highs and low lows, and really a lot to cover as we look through the career and the life of Mr. Excitement Ryan Kidd. And it's been a great, almost therapeutic series for me here as we start 2023, going back and taking a look at old matches and talking about fallen friends. And just, there's a lot going on in the world right now, and it's really been a fun time to spend the time with you here every other Wednesday at the official Ryan Kidd Pro Patreon page and give you an update and some insight onto what I think, what's going on, and taking again a hop in the time machine to go back and reminisce on some fun moments. With that being said, we are going to bring things to a close. Again, I want to remind you all to check out Premium Weekly Newsletter number 154. It's hard to spit out. I can't believe we've been going for that long. But 154 weeks of premium weekly blogging. And there's so many more in the archive before we went premium. So again, all over, 200, 300 weeks of blogging. I can't believe it. Every Thursday, and it's coming to you tomorrow if you're listening to this on time. So again, check that out. We've got a full live event schedule and so much more coming your way. Again, RyanKiddPro.com is the one-stop shop to get all of that information on what's coming, what's new, and what's happening in the world of Ryan Kidd Pro. I want to thank you all for tuning in. Tune in not next Wednesday, but the Wednesday after as we kick off February. And we have so much more coming your way as we wrap up episode 11 of the XSite Update. Thank you. Love you. Take care. See you next time. And we've officially wrapped up. If you are watching, don't go quite yet because we've got some information. I want to recap the show real quick. I thought it was good. I thought it was a bit short. I kind of overestimated the Underground story. Again, looking back, it really was just 2 days of filming, and there was only 3 matches. And again, I could have kind of broken down the entire story, but I think that's up to the listener to decide. And again, I could bore them with stories of wrestlers that they've never heard about and kind of confuse them with the name changes and all that. but I thought it was most important to highlight my story and my involvement in the underground. So hopefully I did the story justice. Again, if you have any questions, put them in the comment section here, and hopefully I can address them and answer them on a future episode of the XSite update. I want to give you some updates real quick that people don't know about. If you saw yesterday, AAA announced 3 Triple Manias in the month, I'm sorry, in the year of 2023, not the month, that would be incredible, but 3 in the year of 2023, one of which in Tijuana, June 16th. So if you know anything about me and what I do, you can probably expect that Ryan Kidd and American Icon autographs are going to have something to do with that. Also, WrestleMania week is coming to Los Angeles. You can guarantee that Ryan Kidd and American Icon autographs are going to have something to do with that. And as we move forward into February, we've got One Ring Circus, Ryan Kidd versus Tough Tim Hughes, who is a tough bastard, is coming your way for, again, One Ring Circus in the month of February. We've got a lot coming your way. Stay tuned as we reach you, the All Access subscriber, patreon.com/, Ryan Kidd Pro, every day with updated content. Check it out. Don't forget to tune in, and we will see you on the next one. Thank you all. See you next time.